You're listening to Sip and Grow the podcast, the show where we taste awesome, delicious wines while having unfiltered conversations about our passions, experiences, struggles, entrepreneurship, and life. My name is Nicole Di Pasquale, and I'm a wine enthusiast just trying to pursue her passions and dreams while taking you on the journey with me, one episode at a time. My ultimate goal is to not only bring you wine knowledge and value, but also inspire you to enjoy your process and journey in pursuing your passions and dreams. Because guess what? The person you become while enduring the process is more important. So sit back, grab a glass, and let's sip and grow together. Hi, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Sip and Grow the podcast with me, your host, Nicole Di Pasquale. Today it's kind of sprinkling outside, so we're gonna see if we can get through this episode without getting soaked. But I said, fuck it, we're gonna film. We're gonna film. So today I actually have a white wine for you guys. It's 100% made of the Semillon grape. I actually did a recent episode on a white Bordeaux, which was a blend between the Semillon grape and the Sauvignon Blanc grape. So today we're just gonna try 100% Semillon white wine. So this one specifically is from Mendoza, Argentina. It's from the Uco Valley, one of my favorite areas in Argentina to drink wine from. And this one is called Mendel Semillon, and it's a 2020 vintage. I got it for about $26 in Milanos. It's a local Argentinian bakery and cafe almost, and they have really good Argentinian wine selections there. So I picked this one up there because I kind of wanted to do something I haven't tried yet. I haven't tried a Semillon from Argentina yet, so this is the first. But the Semillon grape, as you guys know if you listen to the White Bordeaux episode, it is mostly grown in France or most popularly grown in either France or Australia, and it's actually one of the main grape varietal used for a White Bordeaux. So this one is the vines, I believe, were planted in 1947, so they're kind of on the older side of vines, and they only have about 5 acres of the Semillon planted in that vineyard. It's called Finca. I wrote it down. It's called Finca Remota. It's 1,040 meters above sea level. And it has alluvial soils, so it's like very calcareous, stony, sandy. That just means it has really good drainage system. And I'm excited to try this one today with you. It does say here that the fermentation is 85% of it is fermented in stainless steel tanks, and then 15% in French oak barrels, in new French oak barrels. So let's go ahead and open it. And today I actually wanted to talk about aging wine because I feel like that is an art and science in itself. So, as you know, winemaking is science, basically. So, there's a lot of chemical compounds involved in making wine and in wine. So, this bottle right here contains a lot of chemicals or compounds in it, and one of the most like popular chemical compounds is called phenolic compounds. So there's a lot of phenolic compounds in wine, but the most popular one that me and you know of is tannins, right? So like once the wine is created, fermented, and bottled, there are still chemicals involved or compounds in the wine that can ultimately change or evolve or become, something more, right? So like there's a lot of aromatic there's a lot of compounds that like help with the aromatics of a wine and the flavor of a wine. So these phenolic, am I saying this right? Phenolic compounds, yeah, phenolic compounds are ultimately that. And one of the major, or the biggest and most important one is tannins. So remember how tannins are, they're important because they ultimately, I mean, they have a lot of benefits, right? So like, remember how tannins are kind of, if you drink a highly tannic wine, you start to like taste, it's almost like you have this like astringent feeling on your tongue and like you pucker up. Well, tannins are actually, they love, one of the things tannins love to do is they love to bind to proteins. We're going to talk a little bit of science here. So when tannins bind to proteins, or they like to bind to a bunch of different compounds, one of their favorite things to bind to is proteins. And our saliva, actually, fun fact, our saliva has proteins in it. So like protein compounds. So when you drink a tannic wine, these tannins ultimately bind to the proteins in our saliva, which ultimately enables the saliva to like lubricate our mouth, and that's what gives you that like astringent puckering feeling when you taste the wine, basically. So those are fun facts. But when aging a wine, you have to consider, there's like three important things you have to make sure you get right when aging wine, right? One is the temperature of the area you're storing the wine. Two is the, well, I guess that goes with temperature because you have to make sure it's like humid enough. So temperature and environment, and then also the storage place, because it has to be kind of like cool, damp, and dark is the three things that you need in order to have like a good storage system for wine, to age wine, if that's your goal. If your goal is to age wine, you need to make sure you find a place that is cool, damp, and dark. So ultimately, what these proteins, or what these tannins do is they love to bind to a bunch of stuff. So like they they ultimately, like when they're in a wine, how can I explain this easily? So like in a wine, you have a bunch of tannins, but they go crazy and wild, and they're like, oh, I wanna combine my, like, I wanna get together with all these different compounds in a wine, right? So essentially, you might think, holy crap, that's crazy, that's wild. They're just gonna keep on forming a bunch of new things with different compounds and all this stuff. But what happens is when tannins actually bound, like they go through this process called polymerization, which is like basically when they bind together, and they form like this long chain of tannins. Think of it like a long chain of tannins. And when that happens, that long chain kind of falls to the bottom of the bottle and turns into sediments. So when that happens, that's when the wine actually becomes smoother and doesn't have that astringent quality anymore. So when that ultimately is like think of when you first open a Cabernet Sauvignon, it's like intense and like maybe super tannic, and you have like, you drink the first sip and you're like, oh my god, this is like very astringent. And then 5 years later you drink the same cab and you're like, oh my god, wow, like this is super smooth on the feel. I see like a lot of bold complex flavors coming out here. That's because over time the tannins that were present at the beginning weren't, are like, they dropped to the bottom and became sediment. So like you got all the flavors, like the flavor profiles and like aromas and stuff from the tannins, but now you don't have that astringent quality anymore, which ultimately makes it like a super wine. So these things are important during the aging process, and like in order for all of this to kind of work out, and this is just like one side of things because there's a lot of different factors and compounds in wine that can change over time, and this is why the environment of where you store your wine matters is because the environment affects how these compounds react, right? So like if you don't have like a good humid, because you want it to be damp, but you don't want it to be too humid, right? Why do we want our wine cellar to be a little bit humid? Because you actually need to make sure that the cork in the bottle is doesn't dry out, because if it does dry out, then like there might be more oxygen that comes in, or like the wine can go bad quicker. And then if it's too damp or like too humid, then the cork might get a little too wet, and then mold might start to form in the cork. There's so many different factors involved with storing and aging wine that can ultimately change the wine in the bottle, right? But you just want to set your wine up for success when it comes to storing the wine, so that when the 5 years pass or the 10 years pass, you set up all the compounds in the wine for up for success to like create an even more complex, beautiful wine when you open it 5 to 10 years later. Because ultimately, it's like all these compounds are still working in the bottle, whether we like it or not, and they can all be positive if we support them to be positive. So I would say like the best range or temperature range to have in your storage system would probably be like 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Make sure it's damp, and make sure that no UV ray light goes through to the bottles, because that can actually disturb like stable organic compounds to kind of just like turn the wine bad, I guess, or like do something that won't be good for the wine. And then another thing too is like when wine ages, it kind of turns brown. So like not brown, the color kind of turns into like a brownish color, which isn't a bad thing. So like a really like an aged red wine, the color will probably be like a red brown garnet color. That's why a lot of times when we do these analysis, like when you look at the color of the wine, you can also that can tell you how old a wine is. And then usually for whites, it'll be like a golden brown color, but you don't want it to be too brown, because then if it's too brown, that means like something went wrong or it oxidized too much and it's not good to drink anymore. But to that point, wines that are high in acidity actually tend to be better candidates for aging, because think about how when you cut an apple and you put like lemon on it, it doesn't turn brown, right? So wines that have higher acidity levels tend to be better candidates for aging because of that factor. I thought that was a fun fact. But anyways, let's go ahead and try this wine. So it's crazy because on the nose, I'm getting a lot of like green fruit notes and very citric notes, like lemon and almost like grapefruit even. So like on the nose, it doesn't smell how it tasted, because like on the nose, it almost makes me feel like I'm gonna have a Sauvignon Blanc, because of like it's more on the acidic side on the nose, but then when I drank it, it's more like a Chardonnay, because it's like a medium bodied white wine that is super smooth and has that like velvety creamy texture that Semillon brings to us with time, which I love that. Yeah, and I'm almost getting like, I definitely get the green fruit notes, like the pear is very present in there, but I don't know, it's like it has like a nice little like oakiness to it, and it has a really really good body, but it is a high, like you still get that acidity coming through with those green fruit notes, but then it's almost like the oakiness side of it kind of gives it that body and that heaviness to it. But overall, I think it's a very good, solid Semillon wine. This is the first time I have 100% Semillon, so I'm not mad at it actually. Like, I really like this wine for the price point. I think it's a solid wine just because, like, I was expecting if I'm paying $26 for a bottle, like, I expect it to be good, and I'm not disappointed. My rating for this would probably be, let me try it one more time. I like the complexity of it. It's like, it's a good balance between the acidity, but you also get like those notes in there, those grapefruit notes. And I love that it's like a medium bodied white wine. So I'm going to give it an 8.4 out of 10. I think it's really good. If you guys are able to try it out, let me know. Let me know if you like it. Let me know what you think. And remember, storing your wine is important, but one last thing that I want to say about like aging your wine is there is no right or wrong time to open your wine bottle. I think it's a great way to experiment with aging wines is to try once you have the setup, right? So like once you have the perfect setup to store and age your wines, what I would do is literally like, okay, you get, I don't know, 4 bottles of the same wine, right? So like you get a cab, a 2024 cab, right? So you're like, okay, cool. In 2025 or 2026, let's say 2026, I'm gonna open this cab up and see how it tastes and if I like it or not. Then fast forward 2028, I'm gonna open the second one, and like you just go on opening the wine like 2 or 3 years after to see what range you need for that wine to taste good for you. Because ultimately, you can follow a process to age a wine, but every wine is like, you have to remember all the wines we have each year, every vintage is different, and like everything depends on the harvest that year, the weather, the region it comes from, how the bottle was stored. Like everything is a factor that can affect the wine positively or negatively. And you just have to take all of that into consideration and understand that like every bottle is different. So you just need to kind of know the varietals you like, and how they do with the storage system that you have, and see what range, like year wise, what range works for you, and then just tend to open those varietals during that amount of time that you allotted for that specific wine that you like. But I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you drink your wine tonight, and I will see you all on the next one. Cheers.